document.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is September 23rd, and this is a special board meeting. Sue, may I ask you to take the roll call?
Mark Borowski.
Here.
Corey Montiel.
Here.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Here.
Markel Moore.
Here.
Joseph Como.
Here.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Here.
Anthony Zenobia.
Here.
Aaron Robertson. Kelly Piasek.
Here. And Sue, can you verify that the meeting has been posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you very much. Well, we're here tonight to talk about a purchase contract and some proposals from the administration around buildings. So Dr. Siebert, would you like to get us started? And
Yes, I would,
Thank you.
I would love to. Thank you, Dr. Piasek. So, thank you all for being here tonight. And as you know, administratively, we take very seriously the responsibility to be strong stewards of our constituents' resources, and we appreciate and know that all of you as board members do as well. So, this administrative recommendation today is to accept the offer to purchase and sell both the Lindholm and Randall buildings to Carroll University. And that recommendation coming from Mr. Clark and I is founded in three essential principles. The first one being our enrollment trends. Our district enrollment is decreasing and will continue to do that at least through 2030. And from our administrative opinion, we simply have too many buildings for the current and future enrollment trend. Conversely, Carroll is looking for space to grow their programs in the downtown area, and they're an incredible institution who would be good stewards of these facilities just as we have. The second principle is that of our district footprint. And we have closed schools, as you know, dating back to Pleasant Hill in 2010, Blair in 2019, and Whittier in 2020. Even with those closures, we still have 29% of our buildings with available capacity within the schools. The sale of these two buildings would decrease that available capacity to just under 25%, with certainly more work for us to do then in the future as well. But this sale would also allow us to utilize all buildings within the district portfolio going forward, meaning that we would no longer have a vacant Whittier and no longer have a vacant Blair, as we would relocate Randall to Whittier and Lindholm to Blair. The third key point is our district structural deficit. And for the past couple of years, we've been collectively committed to reducing the structural deficit that we have here in the school district of Waukesha of between $3 and $4 million each year. By selling buildings and becoming more lean, we eliminate operational expenses as well as deferred maintenance on two buildings, which helps to address the structural deficit. And it also allows us to focus on fewer buildings now and into the future. So with that being said, again, I appreciate your consideration of this administrative recommendation, and as always, your willingness to tackle difficult situations to help the school district of Waukesha move forward in a positive direction.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. So the way that we have the meeting posted and agendized for tonight is that we have the opportunity to move to executive session to deliberate on and discuss the specific details of the purchase request that's been given to us, and then we will reconvene to open session, and we have the opportunity to talk about things related to the administrative proposal, any details that would not be appropriate for executive session. Any questions before we may consider taking a vote? Any questions about that? Okay. So we would need a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
Would you be willing to read the agendized item? Thank you.
Sorry. A motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, paren 1, paren E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session for sale of district properties.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Como. Okay, Sue.
Corey Montiel.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Anthony Zenobia.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye. Passes 8-0. So we'll now convene to executive session. Thank you. Okay, we are back in open session to consider the administrative recommendation on the proposal that we've reviewed. Purchase Randall STEM Elementary School and the Lindholm Administration Building. So this would be the point in time where could ask for clarifications from Mr. Clark or Dr. Siebert on the administrative recommendation. Mr. Montijo.
Thank you, Dr. Piasek. The board held a listening session. Constituents came. We heard a lot of good comments, had good participation. I think the administration did an excellent job of presenting their recommendation and their thoughts. For those who weren't there, one of the themes that came through was the traffic pattern and the concern about that. Could you briefly address how the administration is thinking to address the traffic situation there?
Sure, Mr. Clark can take that for us. Well, now you're disconnected.
Anyway.
Yeah, we met with, and I'll bring up a drawing. We met with Ruckert and Milky Engineering earlier today to look at options, and this has been discussed previously as an option, I think, going way back, but we revisited it today, and what we would do is wrap, so this is a sky view off to the far right, South High School. And then it doesn't show well on this map, but between South and Whittier, there's like 2 or 3 tiers of a hillside, so it's not all flat, green, beautiful space in terms of options. D is an asphalt surface that is playground, kind of a secondary playground for Whittier. There's no access to this in terms of a vehicle getting there, and we don't think that'd be the best option, but just in case you're wondering what that area is. It's an asphalt area, but again, there's no road to it or access from the road or from the lower parking lot. So what we talked about today was in section B here, you would enter off of College, and there's already kind of a path, an asphalt path around Whittier. So what we would do is continue that path across the east side of the playground, and we already have an existing exit onto Roberta right here. We might want to look at widening that. We definitely would want to look at repaving that entrance because it's a pretty steep drop off to the road. Might take out a few mufflers if we don't do something there. But so this wraparound, and the engineer seemed to think that this was viable. We might have to do a little surface area right here where the yellow and red area merge into that corner. The nice thing is, right when you round this corner, there's a canopy here already, so that could be the drop-in, so kids could get out of the car and quickly undercover and into the building. I forget the door number, but I think it was 6. And what we are thinking is, and I'll have, so I authorize, if things go through tonight, for Ruckert and Milky to draw up a more formal plan. But the nice thing about this is it's a one-way flow of traffic. And we all know that's a very busy 4-way stop, which I think everyone who lives in Waukesha acknowledges that. It allows us to, similar to what we have done at other sites, it allows us to queue up a lot of cars all the way back. And I'll throw out 35, 40 cars could queue up on our property. Kids are being dropped off without passing traffic, needing to worry, a quick drop off. And then what we are looking to do is when you exit onto Roberta as you flow through the yellow area, have this be a mandatory right turn out to pull that traffic away from the 4-way stop. Grant you how effective that is up to every parent or whoever's driving that child to school. But we think pulling that traffic away from that 4-way stop will relieve, I think, what is probably the biggest concern. So that's the plan we have. I don't want to say this, get ahead of the game here, but a lot of the asphalt's already here, so I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of additional asphalt needed. We would still leave a little walkway along the building, along the red here. Not that we'd want kids walking there, but if they are going to walk there, you want to provide them a safe spot. We would likely take out, there's 3 basketball hoops along the yellow right here. We'd take out probably the first one right here, and then maybe realign their basketball hoops. This is a very big playground. So that's the plan that we have as of now. And we'd also be looking at staggered start times with South, targeting about 15 minutes between start time and finish time, to give to give the high school a chance to empty out or fill up, depending on what part of the day it is.
Thank you, Darren. So just a clarification, they would be coming in off of East Avenue, correct, not College?
I'm sorry, east, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And so from this standpoint, is there a one-way in on East and a one-way out on Roberta?
Yep.
Okay. I agree. I think that four-way stop is something else. So I've gone through that four-way stop the last couple of days, specifically targeting times with just South present. So the clarification that I would have is having them turn right onto Roberta. It's up to them, right? There's Westminster Drive that they can go forward, but the staggered start with South should also help. It's turning right is aiming them towards South, and
Right.
just having an understanding as to, is that going to create a separate bottleneck right in front of South?
Yeah, and we think the staggered time will relieve that.
Currently, we just passed out a sheet that looks at what the current times are. So currently, there's a 20-minute gap in the morning, with South starting at 7:35 and Randall starting at 7:55. That would be ideal. But in the afternoon, there's a 10-minute gap, which might be a little bit tight. So one possible solution in working with the Randall Governance Board would be a subtle, as you see on the bottom, tweak, where instead of starting at 7:55, they might start at 7:50, which would then give you a 15-minute gap in the morning, and then they would wrap up at 2:50 as opposed to 2:55. South stays exactly the same, so all three high schools are the same. But then we'd get a 15-minute gap in the morning and a 15-minute gap in the afternoon, which could be beneficial. And that would be very subtle, and in meeting with the staff at Randall, they really like the time, and I think we heard from the parents too that they like the time that they go to school, but I don't know that 5 minutes would be all that significant, but it would give us a nicer buffer on both ends of the day.
The most important thing about this plan, because you still are next to a high school and next to a four-way stop, is that the kids are getting dropped off the road in the safety of, our property and our playground. So that's the big gain. In the 15 minutes roughly on each end, we think will give you enough time to, might not be perfect every day, but would be a major improvement.
Mr. Montijo?
Thank you. It reminds me of the solution done at Butler Middle School. I went to Butler Middle School before any of this happened. I remember being dropped off way back then. I also dropped off my daughter before the change in traffic pattern, after the addition, or before the addition and remodeling and after. And that solution that's in place now is, I won't say perfect, but it's really, really good. Gets all the students off the road. Very similar kind of corner situation, brings them around the back. Yeah, we stack them up pretty deep at Butler too, and it goes quick. The administration there and the teachers have quite the system in place that works very, very well.
Yeah, Butler, we cut the corner similar.
Yeah.
Was it Hine to Moreland? I think it's Hine on the backside of Butler.
Yeah.
And the buses entered on Hine and then had a separate actual drive lane from cars. Here we don't have the bus issue with the stem. And then everything exited onto Moreland with a forced right-hand turn there. And then along the east side of the building, there was a kind of a teardrop type shape where the cars could come in, rotate in and out with the parents. And that was the one where we continue to have some struggles, but it came a long way. Jason Sadowski was the principal last year, I think did a nice job of improving that as we went.
Yeah.
But it's 15 minutes when everyone's showing up in that window, so. But I think it's a much safer than what we had.
I'm sorry, could I, want to follow up?
Absolutely.
On the north side of Butler, the right, where the vehicles exit?
Yeah, with the cars?
Yeah, the forced right turn would be similar to this. At Butler, it's a sign that says right turn only, that about 20% of the people see, or at least
Yeah.
acknowledge. I don't know if we could maybe do a better job of.
I think 100% of the people see the sign.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't,
Down there, and I think they'll all see it.
I don't know if that would be structural. We also talked about, do you just put a barricade out there to help visually guide you
Yeah,
at both schools? But again, a lot of this depends on the families and the parents.
right.
We can design wonderful things, but it'd be the similar thought process.
Right.
Because you would have that option to enter, if you did want to head, like you wanted to take, you could go in the neighborhood and come back out on a street further down from the four-way stop.
Sure.
And I've even thought, like, for south, should we be forcing right-hand turns coming out of like the student to force them down to Sunset? But that's a whole nother wave of this conversation, I think.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Thank you. Have we reached out to the city for support in being able to kind of, I do still worry about that four-way stop. No matter on a normal day, even for a fact of coming here tonight, right, I was 10 deep in that. That four-way stop is going to inevitably create a backup for people just trying to get into the one-way entrance. So I'm trying to think as to what other options do we have, because we will bottleneck there. I do like the flow. I think the flow and the safety of the kids, having them move away from the street is critical. I think that's a great piece. But still, that point of trying to come in off of East, knowing that four-way stop will still remain an issue. 15-minute time frame to sit when you're going car by car just to get through that, may be worth the discussion with the city to figure out how can we leverage that.
Yeah, I thought we'd engage the city to see if, and I'm not a traffic, what do you do, but lights is a natural thing that comes to people's mind.
Yep.
Is this a candidate for that? And I don't know what that process is, but I think we should investigate that. I think we inform the city of our plan and say, could we study this to see, give it some time, kind of mature as a process, and then see what is that process for lights? Does this qualify for streetlights or not? But I do think they're an active partner in this, because if you can improve that flow on the outside, the front of the building, it's a major advantage to the site.
I agree. I have one follow-up, just to kind of highlight on the south, which I would recognize as a separate discussion. I would encourage that we have 2 right turn onlys, right? So that we're forcing that traffic to flow the one way, period. It removes that piece away from our elementary school, helps avoid traffic. I get we can't control, and we've got some pretty energetic teen drivers, for lack of better words, but I think that is a recommendation, as to try to unify traffic flow around that block, consistent, so that we're keeping everybody in sync. I think it's worth the discussion.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Zenobia?
Yes, to understand this a little bit better, this is going to be the drop-off and the pickup route going forward. Is this going to be like one lane of traffic? Is there going to be enough to go around cars that are parked waiting? I mean, I've been to the back of this area one time, and, I mean, I would assume that there may need to be some excavation on the hill to make room there. I know there's probably one lane of traffic there that you could get through, but
We're picturing one lane of traffic to go around. The other thought we have is, once you make that turn, kind of where the letter E is, right below there, where it kind of widens out with the playground, that we would put 3 or 4 temporary parking spots for the people who they're looking for whatever that may be lost in the back seat or whatever, to give them an option to to add that second lane along, now I'll let Rooker and Milky tell us the details on that. I think it would be a lot of earthwork on that back, on the red side, particularly as you near the corner.
Well, and my reason for bringing that up is that coming around that corner, you're not going to be able to see. And if you're, on the one hand, there will be the frustration of you're sitting in line and you can't move until someone picks up. And so you're kind of stuck there. There may be a tendency to try to get around that if there were space or not. But it's also a blind spot if you're coming around that corner, you know.
Yeah,
How is that going to be monitored? Is there going to be someone out there? I think that would be the biggest worry that I would have.
no, that's a fair concern. That's why I think the only immediate asphalt work is in that corner to widen that a little bit, but not enough to go to two lanes. And then maybe the corner on down to what we call the staff parking lot, Area B, you might have some widening of the asphalt there, but again, not to create two lanes, but to create, a little movement away from the building to give you a better line of sight.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Como?
And one of the other topics that we heard from the parents last week was dealing with picking up all the students at Randall and fitting them into Whittier. And we know from a total population size that would work, but we didn't have the details to share with people with respect to number of classrooms and how many kids can fit in the classrooms. Could administration go through some of those details on the fit?
Sure, certainly, Mr. Como. So Mr. Clark will pull up some of the maps that we shared with you and maps that we've subsequently shared with the Randall parents as well in their family communication on Friday, along with the way that we calculate the capacity of the buildings, which is 22 students K2 and then 25 students 3-5 in a classroom. That's how we come up with the capacities in the capacity study that we reference. So Mr. Clark can walk us through those maps. Essentially, in looking at both buildings, they have, depending how you want to count them, 18 to 19 classrooms. There's one in the basement at Randall that you can or cannot count, and there's one at Whittier that you can or cannot count. But currently, Randall uses 15 classrooms in their current school. So as we talked about with the parents, there is room to move them there and have additional space for growth and/or for maker spaces, small group instruction, different types of opportunities. And based on the current enrollment of Randall, which is 378 kids, and the capacity of Whittier, which is 406, there is room for growth as well. Again, that's based on that calculation that Mr. Clark and I just talked about. But with all that being said, we also shared with you the 10-year history of enrollments for each of those schools, and we can get back into the classrooms a little bit more deeper too. I'll just give you this high-level overview at this point. Each of these schools has had, for example, we didn't give you Whittier, but Whittier was, finished at 190, but at one point had in the upper 300s at the school and fit appropriately. Similarly, STEM Randall has had as many as 500 kids back to 2013-14, now is at 378. So when we say that the buildings have those capacities, obviously they've exceeded the capacity that we say Randall currently has. And that just means you have more kids in each of those classrooms. So even with growth and even with, exceeding the 22 and 25 standards, we have more room than 378 to 406, if you know what I'm trying to tell you. There's flexibility there in the way that we can calculate. And we just think that the other nice thing about Whittier is we shared with you also the square footage maps. Some of the rooms are bigger, some of the rooms are the same, some are a little bit smaller when you compare Randall going to Whittier. But what's nice about Whittier is that almost every classroom has natural light because of the way the building is set up. So they feel a little bit bigger because of that natural light. And the other nice thing is the additional green space that we have at Whittier that Randall currently does not have the luxury of. So we think there are a number of opportunities, and then the same with the other topic that came up around playgrounds. We're evaluating those playgrounds. Mr. Clark can talk a little bit more to that. We will make sure the kids have, just like we did at Hadfield, nice playground opportunities that the district will fund. And then the parents that have raised that significant amount of money can use that money in some other capacity to, should the board approve this, to improve the Whittier facility for STEM elementary education. But, Mr. Clark, do you want to touch base on anything else on the actual classroom sizes? Or Mr. Como, if there's anything you'd like us more specifically to dive into, feel free.
Yeah, I'll just go through what the study, you touched on the methodology, and it was right, 22 in the lower elementary and then 25 in the upper elementary grades. So what Bray did, and this is Randall's first and second floor, and if you've been in that building, there's a slight difference between, so in case you're wondering how do we get a map when there's slight difference in the floors, but this is what we did. We went through and identified by grade, and then we also identified what future classrooms, meaning from where they were today, what other areas could be used for classrooms. And I can walk through these all, but essentially what you have here, the larger rooms off to the left are your kindergarten rooms, where the coat room's in the room, so it's a larger facility, and then first, second, and third grade all color-coded. And then we did the second, the next floor of Randall, the second and the third floor. So we went through that same process. So then we did it with Whittier, and Whittier's one floor, and I'll scroll up in a second here. But even with Whittier, as Dr. Siebert mentioned, I would say they have the same number of classrooms, maybe one, if you count the one in the basement at Randall, maybe there's one more there. But at this school, this is the library right here. This maker space is not being counted as a classroom. There's another room here that not being counted as a classroom. So we are not maxing out here. There's a special ed room here. They have a room down here that's not big enough for a classroom, but certainly would be big enough for a pull-out or small group. Elementary, they used it here as, I probably had several, I think the PTO was in there for a while and several uses. So there's several sites. They have a separate band and music room down in this corner. The new office is here, secure entrance, fully remodeled health room, ADA compliant bathroom in that space. So I would say they're very equivalent. It's just a slight change in the floor plan. The other area that we've left alone since the addition of the new office is the old office space. It's three smaller offices, thinking that if the enrollment's a little more, you'll have more full-time type specialty teachers, psychologists, social workers, or you could empty that space out and turn that into another very nice instructional space. So very, very equivalent in terms of square footage and size of rooms between the two buildings.
Yeah, I truly do appreciate the maps really helped a lot. The color coding and being able to say, hey, this is where we are now. Mm-hmm. This is where we're going. If you're visually oriented, this really, I think, did the trick for me. Because I think one of the things that the parents were having trouble with, and I could see why, is the buildings are so very different, and different shapes and sizes, and how perhaps they haven't been to Whittier before, don't know how large it is. So, we can't do a comparison side by side up on the screen here, but when you can look at both sets of maps side by side, that extra detail really helped me quite a bit to get comfortable with this.
Mr. Moore.
Speaking about enrollment, thank you for explaining, because I thought of the same thing, that it was very clear and visual. You do have a lot of space to do a lot of different things like intervention and using the extra rooms for other resources. But I had a question about enrollment, going back to that question. Now, students who, just so that if parents are concerned, whatever, students in that area, if they choose to opt in, because this is a district-wide school, they would have that option if there's space available, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Montijo.
Thank you. You mentioned the playground. I know one of the things that came up at the listening session, as you mentioned, was that the students in the PTO raised, I think, 50,
85.
85? Okay, the numbers switch. $85,000 over a number of years for playground equipment. So it sounds like the district is committing to providing a playground at Whittier.
I think there's 2 playgrounds, correct, Mr. Clark?
And this is a satellite view of Whittier. The main playground is in the center of your screen. There's one piece of equipment over here, I don't know, it's the old fire engine, if people remember the old fire engine. I'm
Right.
not sure what grade level that is. And then out in front here, right off of East is what I would consider to be the primary or lower level elementary. One of the things that I asked the engineer today is if we move this, and this is just an idea, if we move this lower playground area and turn this into parking, would that help the traffic pattern? And then would it be better off to move all the playgrounds? Because there's green space in different spots here, but just an idea. But right now it's spread out. I don't know why they have 3 sections. The younger grades, I guess, maybe I understand, but, and we're doing a thorough analysis of that equipment to see if it's, again, as I mentioned at the listening here, I'm not saying we shouldn't get new equipment, but I wanted to provide the PTO and say, if this equipment's good and you want to use those resources for other purposes or something, maybe we hold off, but I'm fine moving ahead with new equipment and making it part of the whole new school environment conversation there next fall.
Right, and I know it's difficult to get into specifics. My worry, though, is if the students who raised money and families who no longer attend Randall, because it takes years to raise that amount of money, their budget and their goal was at $85,000 to get playground equipment at Randall that was appropriate and what they wanted. I don't want them to have to start over again to get the same level of equipment at Whittier, because the number at Randall was $85,000 apparently.
Yeah.
To get the equivalent at Whittier may cost more than $85,000, it may cost less. I guess my thought process is I was involved with this at the PTO at Summit View. I would guess the PTO at Randall has a plan, something that they've shot for and said, look, if we can raise this amount of money, we can put this amount of equipment at Randall. So I would like the district to be able to, I'd suggest that if it's going to cost more to put what the families at Randall's raised to put at Randall, if it's going to cost more to put that equipment at Whittier, that the district cover the difference. I don't know if there is a difference, or what that amount would be, but I think that would be fair to those families. I don't want to have to come back to them and say, because we chose to move your school for a number of very, very good reasons, if that's the way the board goes, now it's going to cost you an extra $20,000 to accomplish the goal you've already accomplished.
Fully understood.
I guess
If I could jump in quickly, do you need me for anything further, or should I log off?
I think we're good.
I think you can log off, Clark.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just
thank
don't
you.
want to take any more of your time.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Clark. I guess I would have the same thought as you, and I would ask the board to look at what we did at Hadfield, all new playground equipment, even more than what the board kind of informally authorized. We did the 4K section as well, and that we would go in there and make sure that it looks just as nice as Hadfield or Banting or any of the other playgrounds that we've done recently. And what we did, if I remember correctly, and that now we were merging 2 schools into one at Hadfield, we even had 2 designs, and the kids got involved in the selection process and kind of got a buzz about, now here, to me, we could finish the year at Randall with kind of a similar, I'd want to put Dan, the new principal, on the clock here to do that, but I think you can make it kind of a enjoyable process, and I can guarantee you'll end up with a product that meets the needs of our other recent schools, because that price point's about where Hadfield was, so I can kind of picture roughly the amount of equipment that would be involved in that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Great. That makes sense to me. I would like to see that, and I'm just one board member, but if this does go forward, I'd like to see some sort of report in the next few months saying, look, this is what the PTO planned on getting, this is what they're raising money for, this is what the district thinks needs to be done at Whittier. This is what your proposal is. We can just work through that and keep track of that. So there's,
Yeah, and Kyle McCarthy, my maintenance manager, him and I have also had discussions of, once this gets finalized here, certainly, maybe right before the holiday break, sitting down with them and going over, this is what we have for the traffic pattern. Let's see what you had for the drawings of the playground equipment. You know, we might have and we always have our insurance company review the playground equipment, so even if the PTO falls in love with something, it's not an automatic. But engaging them in that process, not only reporting out to you, but reporting directly to the PTO, I thought would be a smart move.
absolutely. Yep, smart move. Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
I know that this community has been through a lot of changes. From last year, and if it is approved, this change will be this year too. And I just ask that, if the administration, if you don't mind, just potentially like keeping us just updated on how things are going, and maybe in our Friday packets or email, to just see how things are going. And I'm so sorry. It's been a long day, you all. So sorry about that. But just seeing how, again, keeping us updated, maybe in our Friday packets or email, periodically or quarterly, just to see how the new change is working for those students, and even for the ones that have failed. I would like to just see how things are just going for everyone who had to make a shift, and just hopefully the administration could just, which I know they will, but just keep us kind of updated and stuff, so.
No, absolutely, Mr. Moore. We'd be happy to.
Anyone else? Mr. Borowski?
I just have some questions regarding the impact on the budget. If this sale is approved, do you see that hitting both the sale and the estimated transition costs, hitting the 22-23 budget, which we're getting ready to approve here in about a month or so, or the 23-24 school year, or some of both? Do we have an idea on that?
Most should fall within the current budget year, but some might actually roll over, because you'll have the second half of summer for improvements to happen there. So, but roughly, I would say, if it's kind of ballparking, I would say 80% will fall into the current fiscal year.
Okay.
Assuming supply chain and all those things don't
Right.
sway a normal workflow.
Okay. And this might be a little premature to ask, but his administration, or maybe what are your thoughts on how it's going to affect how we approach the 22-23 school year budget? In other words, we potentially have an influx of revenue. So are you thinking more, well, we might not have to think about cutting things as much because of our typical structural deficit that we have, or is it more, no, let's approach the same way, and maybe this is extra funds, if you will?
I would, and Mr. Clark, I'll start and then feel free. I would suggest we look at this as a one-time real estate transaction that is used for one-time expenses, so it's more of a fund balance transaction. Yeah. But the money that we would use to invest in both buildings to get them up to speed could come from the proceeds, and then their additional proceeds would go into fund balance for future usage. Mm-hmm. So I don't envision it being something that we would try to roll forward, because it's one time that it's coming in. Where we'll see some structural deficit benefit is through the operational expenses that we would take off the table with not plowing, mowing, heating, cooling two buildings for a 12-month period.
Okay, good.
And those savings wouldn't be captured until we're all situated in the buildings.
Right.
It'd be a 23-24 savings.
Okay, yeah, I think that's important for the community to know that it's more the operating costs, and then the rest of it would primarily go to the fund balance, so, okay.
Yeah, great questions.
Mr. Como?
So to that, can you give us a rough estimate then of how much we are making an impact on that structural deficit by doing this? What is that number?
I believe it's like 250 to 300,000.
Of operational dollars. The biggest savings is cost avoidance is a savings as well, is the deferred maintenance. Now, when the timing of those projects would have been budgeted and enacted, I would say within the next 3 to 5 years. I would put that savings of not having to face those deferred maintenance costs at least $4 million. Could be upwards of 5. Ultimately, we would have to decide what that scope of work is. But that $4 or $5 million of deferred maintenance savings, would have happened in the next 5 fiscal years. The exact breakdown of each year, I can't tell you, but a sizable amount of dollars that we can use in other facilities or to help address shortfalls or have the flexibility to do whichever.
So in the point that I'm trying to get at is we still do have a structural deficit that we need to look at. This is not going to be a silver bullet to eliminate that, nor was the merging of Whittier and Hatfield. There are several tasks or decisions that this board will have to make to continue to close that structural deficit and to keep whittling away at it. And this will help if we move forward with it.
Absolutely, Mr. Coleman.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. I think what, we've heard from the community is an overwhelming understanding of the fiscal impact that this has, and I think people understand that. But the larger concern that we really heard from the community is our kids' safety, right? And above anything else, that is our commitment to our kids, is to ensure that we are giving our kids in a safe environment. And I think that the documentation that you've shared has given a very clear picture of that. I like the ideas that we've begun with the engineer on the traffic flow. I know that this is not something that can be resolved in a day. I think in any type of situation, right, you have to pivot. Business decisions are made, it changes the course and the direction of how we have to go. But really my ask is the traffic and the safety is the loudest voice that we're hearing from our community on how we navigate this and how we do it. Executing this well is our number one objective for the safety of our families, for our students, and that is really what they're coming at us for. So while I love what we've done, the biggest piece for us as an overall administration is to execute this well, right? And that means working the relations with the city, making sure that our engineer does well, and then clear, consistent timelines on progress that we're making to share with the parents that have to do that. That seems to be a kind of an underground piece, is that did we take learning lessons from all of our experiences through the years as to building sales and how we've moved and managed to make sure that we do this well. So that, for me, I want us to really take away that when we're listening to our community, they're very loud about the safety. And so executing this traffic plan, I think, is our highest priority to make sure that this is done well.
Just one question. How is this going to impact the HVAC project?
I don't think
It's going to.
phase one, I think we'll proceed with planning now.
Okay. Are we going to have to move anything into phase one? Are we going to have to move something into Blair into phase one? Because.
Yeah, Blair has no cooling,
Right.
Like most of our elementaries. But we also have we're bringing a 12-month staff into that.
Right.
Yep. And board meetings and all these other things. So I am going to, we actually have a meeting on Friday on that HVAC to see how that's going to go. But with the dollars that we may reinvest from the proceeds, might just make phase one a little larger.
Okay.
But again, I'll preface all of that work on what we think we're going to do is
Right.
supply chain is going to be a real major function of defining phase one is also, so.
Okay.
Mr. Matthew.
Thank you. I know we heard from, I think, Mr. Kapinski and Ms. Paz, who's a STEM board member. They did, as Carrie talked about, traffic safety, large concerns. The playground was a large concern. Also, having the the administration's plan solidified prior to the close of open enrollment, I think is something they mentioned, so families have a clear choice on what they're going to do. I have no doubt that will happen, but can we get a commitment to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason that we wanted to bring this to you as quickly as we did.
Right.
So we still have, several months until that process begins for them. So
Okay.
yes, we can have a very clear picture of what the start time, end time, playground, traffic pattern, all those pieces in place. Our goal with the traffic pattern is to bring that to October F&F ideally. So we'll just keep systemically moving down the track. So,
Yeah,
yes.
and what I've seen from this first coming up until now has been great, so I have no doubt that will continue. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, what we might get at F&F might be a map similar to what you've seen, but with more details in terms of what we can do for parking and other, how many cars we can queue up on the line, a little more detailed. It won't be, we won't have surveys done or anything by that point, but just a little better information for you to know, and you can share with the public if you get questions.
And I just wanted to add, maybe as a follow-up to both of your comments, I had the opportunity to visit Hadfield last week during a morning drop-off. And when it comes to the building, and we'd shorter timeline, different challenges. But what I saw in terms of the facility upgrades, the flooring improvements, the gym floor upgrades, the outdoor play set upgrades, the whiteboards, which I know we would be anticipating doing the same for Whittier. All of that happened, and it happened on a pretty short timeline. Now, obviously, there may be supply chain challenges or other things that we need to take into consideration, but when I just look at the facility itself and the building and the way that traffic patterns were happening, there was obviously a lot of time and effort that went into making that work on a much shorter timeline. So I was pleased to see that. Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Como.
Yeah, I'd like to move to accept the purchase and sale agreement that was received on September 27th, 2022, as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Any further questions or discussion? Mr. Montijo.
Thank you. I know these issues are hard. Moving schools, I don't see this as closing a school, I see it as moving a school, but it doesn't occur in a vacuum. Going back to the Whittier merger, I spoke at length, and I know others did too, about the hierarchy of needs and doing some things, in my opinion, backwards. In my opinion, sacrifices need to be made at administration first. I said that back then, and I voted against that merger. Not because those sacrifices weren't being made, but just in the totality, I didn't feel comfortable with it. This is the opposite of what I had a sense of back then. This is the administration taking a large cut. I've been in the district since I was in kindergarten, and the right or wrong, the rib from some parents throughout those long years was, if there's going to be changes, let's deal with Lindholm. Let's deal with Lindholm. That's how we always referred to it. So the administration, in this proposal, they are literally saying, sell our building. Get us out of the building here, the administration, and move you into Blair. And Blair's a fine school, and this is a nice building, but it is, I see it as a sacrifice by the administration to put some skin in the game, saying if there are going to be sacrifices that need to be made, that is one of them. So that meets my requirement for the hierarchy of things that get cut first. Administration, we try to get lean, mean as there as possible, and we're not there yet, but I don't think we'll ever get there, just because that's the nature of large organizations. But I think it's a good step. I think it's a good phase step. Financially, fiscally, this makes sense. the district, downtrend in enrollment is, we've seen that for, I think, since I've been on the board, 4 years or so. So it's not perfect. The way the traffic pattern is being addressed, I think that's great. The respecting the work done by the students and the families who raised those funds for the playground, I think is great. The safety concerns are great. The sacrifice of administration of selling their own building and moving into an existing building that's not going to be as, I think, as pretty or as nice, I think is appreciated. So I support the administration's recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Como?
Hey, I like to try and simplify things, and, we simply have too many buildings, too much square footage, and not enough students to be in the buildings. And these types of, whether we're merging two schools together or we're moving students to a different location, like in this case, getting rid of our buildings, that's recurring savings. Those are the kinds of steps we need to take to have. You want recurring savings when you're trying to address a structural deficit, because every year we have that dollar amount that we start in the hole. So we need to make decisions that have recurring savings. This is an example of recurring savings by getting rid of two properties. We save in multiple facets there. The savings that we had gained by bringing both Whittier and Hadfield students into one physical location, those savings, $700,000 to $900,000, weren't one-time savings. Those are recurring savings. So those are the types of things that we need to do to attack our structural deficit. There's other ways to attack it too, but those recurring savings are the ones that really pay off in the long run, and that's what we're trying to do, is to make really good long-term decisions. I believe this is a really good long-term decision. I've been on the board for a couple of decades, Mr. McCaffrey too. We've never had an offer on this building. And we just had one just made in August here. So, I think we need to, we owe it to our constituents to figure out what is the right size with respect to number of buildings to house our students, and I think this is a good step.
Mr. Moore?
I will say that enrollment decline is occurring everywhere, and so I hope that the community do understand, like Mr. Como said in plain language, that enrollment is decreasing everywhere. As an education professional myself, people are having fewer children than they did back in the day. So you see a lot of empty seats or empty classrooms, or a lot of shortages because of that reason and other reasons too. And I think that the administration is making a sacrifice to put their own skin in the game as well. So I think I think that shows compassion to the community. I think that shows empathy, and I think that we have to be so creative in how we move forward for this district until 2030 because of that enrollment decline. So I think that being creative and being compassionate at the same time is very ideal, and so I commend the administration and the board for doing so. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, Sue, thank you.
Anthony Zenobia,
Aye.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Aye.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Aye.
Markel Moore.
Aye.
Mark Borowski.
Aye.
Joseph Como.
Aye.
Corey Montijo.
Aye.
Kelly Piasek.
Aye, passes 8-0. And that concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone.